Okay, this is my 4th year here, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. Have you all been here before, most of you? Yeah. Okay, I'll try and get some new jokes, but I'll recycle my old ones. I'm into recycling, you know, so I'll do my best. Trying to think of different subjects to talk about, I decided to talk about the jungle. And I'll rub it on for a bit, and I'll take any questions, and I'll try and answer them at the end, okay? Okay, my background, I was Army, 28 years, 1 year parachute regiment, 27 years with the Special Air Service. And when I joined the regiment, it was the end of Malaya, and all the old guys were old jungle sweats. The regiment was disbanded after the war, but resurrected in 1950 to fight the CT, the Chinese terrorists in Malaya. They was our allies in the war, and we armed them during the Japanese invasion of Malaya. But after the war, they carried on the war against all the rubber plantations and things like this. Typical terrorist activities. So the regiment was resurrected to deal with this. And as a young soldier, I just wanted to be like the old guys. They used to speak a little bit of Malay. They wouldn't go to the cookout, it was always mucking. They wouldn't walk, it was piggy. So they had all these Malay words, and I couldn't wait to get into the jungle and be like them. And my introduction was, we got on a boat in Malaya, right up on the Thai border, and about 7 o'clock in the morning, we had a loco up front, 1 on the engine at the back, 8 men in the prow, which is a dugout log, and we went up the old river, the Sungai. And quite a wide river, and you see all the wildlife, all the kampongs, villages, they're all based on rivers, because that's the highways and also the sewers. And so as we went up the river, because the sunlight can penetrate the river banks, it's a profusion of wildlife, flowers, every animal known to man, insects, monkeys, birds, everything. And the river itself full of fish, crocodiles early on. It's 100% humidity and about 90 degrees. So it's very hot, you're sweating all the time, and you're covered in flies, sweat flies, all buzzing around you. The old mosquito and other bloodsuckers actually injecting, stinging you, and you think, what have I let myself in for, you know? There's all this activity. And everything you touch is prickly or stings. So if you fell against a log, don't put your hand out the back of the hand. It's easier to get these thorns out from the back than it is from the palm. So there's all this going on, and it's dark, and then the smell of the jungle. It's all rotting and decaying, and there you are. This is going to be your home for the next 4 months. Different types of jungle. You got primary rainforest where the trees, they grow 200 foot tall, and the jungle floor, it's dark, but you can see about 20 feet, and you can meander between the trees quite comfortably. So movement, travel is not too bad. Where the trees on the top, that's where all the activity is. All the birds, monkeys, butterflies, because it's competing for light. On the jungle floor itself, there's every animal known to man, rhinoceros, elephant, bear, into figures which you put in a book, and you do subtraction from the book, what you're going to send, and the mistakes you won't believe, you know. So a simple signal, and I must say the officers come out with big words. Have apprehended itinerant Chinese. I said, they're not going to understand that. Send it. Took all day to put it out, send it, they didn't understand it, you know. So the signal comes back in the end and say, I've got 4 bad guys, you know what I mean? And there's always arguments of subtraction and addition. And there's always bad conditions. And the poor old signaller, everyone else is eating and scoffing and relaxing, and he's still on the set trying to get through. And if that resupply didn't come on time, whose fault is it? Signaller. But within that troop, you do all the skills. You get cross-trained. Because if your signaller goes down, someone else has got to do it. Get the idea? So the longer you're there, do all the skills, and it's the way to learn, you know. And that's why we're successful. We have good communications. And that's why no other unit could do it.
Would you do it all again?
Yeah, most of it. I told you I was stupid. Yeah. I'd love to be able to go back. I have been back, and they say never go back to an area. I delivered a child in this place, and that was quite a feat, you know. they'd done all their childbirths, things like that, doing it for centuries. And the only time they asked us was if there was a difficulty or complication. And one day, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a guy come into where I had the practice, and he said, "Suck it, Tuan, you know, I'm sick." So I looked at him, we lasted the thermometer, put it in his mouth, and they carried tobacco in like a bamboo pouch. And one of the lads said to him, "Oh, can I have tobacco?" And as he opened his mouth, the thermometer broke. So I was up to him and I said, "Look, you're not sick, clear off." And he said, "Not me, my wife." And then he told me she's in childbirth, and that was rare. So do you either go with them, and if you can't handle it, you lose face, or if you say no, you've undone all the good work you've done, you know. So I was obliged to go. And he set off. I said, "Okay, take it easy. How far?" "Tobruk Jow. That's not very far." Lips like that. 2 hours later, I'm running, and I needed a doctor, and I went down the bank, and as I went down, I slipped, and I kicked him up the backside. So he went even faster. And I got to this campon, which no one had ever heard of, not on the map, and there was all there, all sort of, and the woman, and I arrived and I needed a doctor, you know what I mean? Anyway, it was a breech birth, the baby was born, but she had trouble with the placenta, and the worst thing to do with placenta is to pull it, you know, so we had relaxing drugs like Valium, stuff like this. I injected her with that, and it all cleared, and I was a hero, you know, and I had a big celebration, but I was laid out, I'll tell you. On resupply, later on, after living with the locals, like we had to live away from the campons, and we had to take resupply through a hole in the trees. And the chopper couldn't find us, so I went to the nearest campon, dialed him up, he landed, the crewman got out, I got in, flew out to where we wanted to resupply, and the resupply, quite a lot of weight, ammunition, everything, and it's rigged up to go through a set of rollers, push out the door, lower it down, he cuts off the bottom, and you recover it, put the next load out. Well, the guy didn't tell me that it's best, instead of trying to get through the rollers, cut off up the top as well. So you cut it from the top, there's enough tape on the aircraft, and this is about 150 foot hovering, you know. So I tied the next load, and I couldn't get it through the rollers, so I thought, being a climber, alpine, ran me back, I got my gear on, out the door with it, started lowering it, it got faster and faster, started burning, friction, I let it go, it took a hook around my belt, pulled me to the door, and then it hit the floor. I didn't get killed. I stopped before the door. When I think about that, but that was a normal occurrence, you know. Things like that happen every day. You need someone looking after you. And I think if you follow the rules, you know, life can be as exciting as you want. One final story to finish with. In the later days in Borneo, we'd done cross-border ops, 4-man patrol, and we always had Gurkhas stood by if we got into trouble. We would go out and find the bad guys, and we'd dial them up, either aircraft, artillery, mortars, or bring the Gurkhas in. So we'd done all the wrecking, get all the information, and we're 4 men in the brigade area. So any contact, drop the Bergen, get out as fast as you can. So the Bergen's got all your goodies in. So contact, drop the Bergen, scoop. And like I say, we didn't panic, but we covered a lot of ground, not realising where we were. Couldn't go straight back to the border because that'd be cut off. That's where they start concentrating all their artillery and whatever. And so we're living off our belt kit. And it's not like a Tarzan film where you're picking a pineapple, digging up fruit here. There's nothing. And we're on the move all the time. And finally we got back after 7 days to the LZ, and we've been everything off the belt, plus the belt. And on the DZ we went for the RAF. Now, anyone RAF here at all? Okay, on a Monday, they're getting over the weekend, no chance. So they got your signal, but they're thinking about it, you know. Tuesday, they roll the aircraft out, but they know it's an orderly. Got to fix that. Wednesday, sports afternoon, you've got no chance. Thursday, a little cloud in the sky, weather's changing. Friday, too near the weekend. And so you've had it. We hated the RAF, because I told you about the senses. When an aircraft landed, what stood out most in your mind was the smell of the crewmen. They had all this foo-foo kit on, you know, and you could smell it. And when they dropped us off for an op, they would fly back to beer, dancing, women, and we're up to in swamping leeches, you know. So we weren't very fond of them. But anyway, we was on this DZ waiting for aircraft to come and pick us up, starving hungry, and all we found to eat on the DZ was snails, big white Roman snails. And we curried them, fried them, ate them raw, done everything we could to them. And they still tasted the same. And I think we overdone it eating the snails, because when the aircraft did come, we was too slow to get on it in harsh conditions. And the life expectancy of the villagers was about mid-30s or 40s, because they worked so hard in the conditions, you know. And all my mates, I'm frightened to read obituaries now in case I'm included, you know. But I was one of the youngest. I passed selection when I was 18, that was a record. But now I'm one of the oldest. And I go to these reunions, I look around, there's only a handful of people who was there before me. So that is a worry. So I try and take it easy.
Is there any skills that you know now that you wish you had known back in the jungle?
I wish I could run faster. Yeah, dogs are a big thing now. The lads, they've really got this thing with dogs, like they're so useful in different aspects. And in Afghanistan, a guy he'd clip an Afghan to him and a dog to him and free-fall parachuting. He had his interpreter and his dog, and the dogs were brilliant at detecting all these IEDs, things like this, you know. In my day, in Malaya, they had dogs, and the dog was issued a can of, like, whatever, but that was tastier than the meat block. And the blokes actually gave the dog the meat block. And the dogs lost condition in the jungle, you know. The fur was a harbour for every living thing, you know. So it didn't really go down well, but now, Afghan, a dry climate, we were a law unto ourselves. You just come out of the jungle, you know, you had to spend all your money. 95% on beer, women, song, wasted the rest. Back in the jungle. I wasn't married then, but you're there. So now the lads, they get money, they get a loyalty clause, they can't write books, and they get money for doing it, and they're well off. So they've all invested in houses. I don't think they had the same fun as we had, and they're very serious. And they get. We've done a lot of that with the Yanks. Individually, tremendous guys. They're brilliant at talking about things, and we went to the States in 1962, and we learned so much from them. This is their Green Beret at the time. We needed a language capability, which we didn't practice. The only thing we could teach them was communications. Their demolition and everything else, their medical, was so advanced to what we were. And so we learned so much from them. Now they talk a good fight, but when it comes to it, their policies and everything else, they're completely different from us. Now Delta Force, this Charlie, he was so impressed with us that he sent his guys on our selection. And only one guy passed it. A bloke called Bucky Burrows, after he'd done the endurance, and he come staggering in, and he'd done the last leg on a bottle of Southern Comfort. And he said, the only way you could do it. And I said, how you feeling, Bucky? And this is classic. He said, Lofty, I feel as though I've been chewed up by a nanny goat and shit over a cliff. And that just about summed him up, you know. And that was Bucky Burrows. He was the training officer. I hate technology. Stick to the old ways. On pounds, shillings and pence. I've come home from the Middle East where we fought a real intense battle. And I didn't have a scratch on me. And we had lots of casualties on that trip. I come home, I gave the wife a cuddle, bent down and gave the kid a kiss. Stood up, she had the kitchen door open, it was straight in my head. I'll save her not, you know. It's the wives who left behind, because my wife never went anywhere, because we went away unaccompanied. Yet she had, and I've got 7 kids by the way. I'll tell you that in a bit. She'd take 4 kids to school, 2 in the pram, 2 walking, drop them off to the shop in the iron and the washing, then come pick them up again. I'll be in the sunshine, tan. Come home, lots of money, toys for the kids, hero. Inside a week I'll be gone again. She's chastising the kids. So, you know, that's the life goes. And she still makes me pay for it now, right? But you can't beat your home, you know. And out of all the places I've been in the world, I'm always glad to get home. Yeah, and yeah, it's great. Yeah, folks, thank you very much. Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's what you did. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm not going to walk around with the hat on all day, so I'll take it off. You know I'm me, right? And we'll just dump it over there for a bit. When it sort of really started, and I grew up in Cairns in Australia. You know, how many people here have been to Australia? Fair whack. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you came back. The pointy bit in Australia, that's Cape York Peninsula, and Cairns is really at the base of that. So that's where I grew up as a kid, and I can remember going to school with the local Aboriginal kids and that sort of thing. Even back then, eating green ants and things like that in the school playground. And I was also shown back in those days a tree that was called a soap tree. You could wash your hands, but also you could stun fish with it. And I never knew until years later it was called Alphantonia excelsa, which is its botanical name. When I left school, and by the way, school was not very kind to me because I can't ever remember passing an exam, and that was right through primary school and secondary school. And when I joined the army, I joined as a private soldier in infantry, and I enjoyed the job of being a forward scout because I was my own boss out the front then. And that's when the Vietnam War came along. And I did a couple of tours of duty in Vietnam as a scout. And it was only some time later that I realised walking around the place getting shot at with a pack on your back is not real good, so I transferred across to Army Aviation flying jet rangers, or Kiowa as it's correct in the tours. One incident happened in Vietnam that I think started to really make me think in this direction, and that's we were out on a particular operation, I think it was called Santa Fe, with the Yanks. They were over there. We never really got very close to the Yanks, but we had our own tactical area. And we had a series of contacts with Viet Cong over a number of days. Day 1, day 2, day 3, and they're all very successful. Our rations were running out, and the company commander at the time decided that we would not take a ration resupply, which was very much overdue, for another 4 or 5 days, because he didn't want to sacrifice our security and let the Viet Cong know where we were. So for the next 4 or 5 days, we had no rations. And we really had to stretch out what we had left, because we had worked off a 24-hour ration pack system, which I think the British Army does too. And we had to make that 24 hours last more like 72 hours. And eventually it came in, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be really, really useful if we actually knew what we could eat around the place here, because it was 100% jungle, and we had no idea what the environment there had. So I became very, very interested in trying to catalogue the whole seasonal period. And this was just a hobby, and it was something I did to keep the left hand busy, sort of thing. Photograph the species, then I go back to the university in Townsville and get them to identify the species for me, because I couldn't do it myself. And then write up a bit of a notation on it and that sort of thing. About that time, after I've been doing that about 3 or 4 years, and I've built up quite a bit of a database on the species. About that time, and I also started running survival exercises for Army aviators in particular, and they were mainly connected with rainforest and Cape York areas. And about that time, the Army introduced a thing called the Defence Fellowship, where you could put your hand up and say, I want to go and study something for a period of time that had some relevance to defence. I think they gave away 2 each year, one for Army, and the 2 were for Army, Navy, Air Force, by the way. And I was a very junior captain by this stage, so I put my hand up for this, and I didn't get it because there were all these colonels about to retire in Canberra, and they wanted to do their doctorate and their masters and whatever it was prior to retirement, so they were getting the dish out of the Defence Fellowship at the time. So I went away for a couple of years, and then I decided to give it another go, and the second time round I got it. And I never forget the interview. I was sitting there in front of a board of people, and all these colonels were still there trying to get their final year at university and all that sort of thing. And they had a budget of $500, $1,000. I went in, I had a budget of, I think, $10,000. And I thought, well, I'll never get this. And the colonel said to me, the brigadier that was running the interview at the time said to me, he said, this is all very good for you to let us, want us to let you cut loose with a Land Rover and go around the countryside doing this, etc. But how would we ever know where you were? Because didn't have a radio or anything like that. I said, oh, I'll send you postcards. And with that he said, right, you've got it. And that's how I got the defence bill. The television, that was a mistake. It wasn't meant to happen because in those days the Defence Department had a little film crew, and they used to make little documentaries about what the Army was doing, the Navy, and they were public servants with as a film crew. They came up to Townsville and they were going to do a documentary about the RAF survival course, which was running over at the Air Force in Townsville. And they asked the RAF people about, what do you do about bush food? And they said, well, from a RAF point of view, we're not interested in that because we reckon we'll rescue the downed pilot within 72 hours. So food is not important. It's escape and evasion and shelter and water. But there's a bloke over in Laverack Barracks, the Army Barracks. He's doing something on food in the bush, and that was me, of course. So they came over and saw what I was doing, then they said, well, what are you doing now? And I said, oh, I'm about to go for Kimberley's and the catalogue that area there. And he said, they said, well, can we come along and film it? And I said, if you want to. So they came along, they filmed the stuff in the Kimberley's. And at the end they put together a 1-hour documentary, and they said to me, what are you going to call this? And I said, well, it's your film, you call it what you like. And they said, well, what do the Aboriginal people call you? And I said, well, probably a lot of things once I go. But it's either the Berry Man or the Bush Tucker Man. They said, oh, that'll do, Bush Tucker Man. So that's how it's got its name. Then they put the film together. They took it along to the Defence Department, and the Defence Department said, that's great. The ABC then had a look at it. They sold it to the ABC. That's our equivalent to your BBC. And the BBC, or the ABC and Defence got together and said, why don't we do a whole series with this bloke? And so I just basically tapped on the shoulder and said, your job next year is to go and make a documentary series with the ABC. And we're going to lend our helicopters and a few things like that and take it from there. And that's how the whole thing happened. It was really quite an accident. It wasn't meant to happen, and it turned out to be quite good, really. And then, by then I'd been in the Army for 20 odd years, and it was time to move on. So I retired from the Army. I stayed active in the Army Reserve, which is, what do you call that here? Territorial, yeah. And that went on. We made a second series, then a third, and then I did a couple of 1-hour documentaries diving on the Pandora, the shipwreck in the Torres Strait, and another one diving on the Dutch ship of the Batavia off the West Australian coastline. After that, I started writing a few books. We did 8 in all, 4 for adults and 4 for children. The children's books were called The Living Desert, Rainforest, The Top End, and I think it was, what was the other one? Top End Arnhem or something like that. I forget the exact title now. And we did 4 adult books, and the bestseller we did was a thing called Explore Wild Australia, and the field guide for bush tucker. Okay, now it's always good for me to tell you this, but then it's always good to get a feedback from you via questions, and I'm sure you've noticed that. And he'd identified this particular species. It was called Cassytha filiformis, I think. It's called devil's guts. And I identified the vine and I saw the fruit on it, and it was a very tiny thing about as big as a pea, and translucent in colour when it's ripe. And I tasted it, it was quite sweet. So I had half a dozen, and later that night I found out why they called it devil's guts. And I rang him up on the electric telephone when I got to Weeper, and I said, "Hey Alan, that kasai thing, you said it was edible." He said, yeah. He said, "Where did you find that?" And I said, "In your book." He said, "Yeah, what version?" I said, "Oh, I'm the 75. "Oh, you should have got the 76 version." I said, "It was poisonous in that." So that's the only time I've ever made myself sick of the whole thing. Yeah. Yes, what else we got? What's my favourite bush tucker? Well, it's a toss-up between barramundi and crayfish, and that's bush tucker, don't worry. In a couple of the episodes we did, we were talking about the possibility we had a Dutch settlement in Central Australia way before Captain Cook came down the east coast. We've now identified quite a bit more on that. We know it wasn't Lieutenant Nixon from the East India Company, it was Lieutenant Robert Dale from Swan River, and the year that they did it was, and the Dutch were shipwrecked in 1708 on a ship called the Concordia, which banged into the west coast of Australia. And we were forever looking for a Mount Singapore that related to this story, or what they called Mount Singapore. And it's only in the last month that we've actually nailed that location. So we've nailed the location now. Now what we've got to do is prove the archaeological evidence and find that. And that's a story that's evolving month by month. Yeah, it's looking very good. Very interesting. Yeah. Yes. Am I still involved with Pendennis Park? Pendennis Park, for those of you who don't know, was actually a patch of dirt that we acquired from the Queensland government for war veterans to go, particularly those who had PTSD and things like that. Because after the Vietnam War, we had a lot of trouble with post-traumatic stress disorder in the Australian Army, and it's bubbling to the surface, of course, now because we're involved in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all that sort of thing as well. So that's all happening all over again. But we do have an area now set aside in the bush where they can go and camp and go and fish and stay. And some of them stay there for months at a time. We made it so that the park was open, as we call it, between Anzac Day, which is the 25th of April, and Armistice Day. And really you wouldn't want to be there outside that area anyway, because it's all wet season. I use Aboriginal people quite often for running survival courses for aviation, but as a self-propelling industry amongst the communities, no, it doesn't tend to happen. And whenever this sort of thing does try to get off the ground, it works fine for the first period of time, and then it sort of waters away a bit, you know. There's a question over here.
What's your favourite type of animal in Australia?
You mean to eat, do you?
No.
No. I particularly like that bush tucker called bullock.
Have you ever been anywhere that you've never found anything to eat?
There are certainly some places like that, yes. Certainly in Central Australia, around the Simpson Desert and that sort of thing. It is very, very hard. Now, I'll just point out a bit of an idea here. In the rainforest, there was, in traditional times, 1 Aboriginal per square kilometre. In the desert country, it's 1 Aboriginal per 30 square kilometres. So the sustainability is quite different. And you can find places in the desert where you land there and there's just nothing there. You know, nothing. You couldn't survive. Well, certainly I couldn't do it.
Have you ever been in any situations you've been frightened?
You mean during the Vietnam War?
Through your life, bushcraft, whatever.
Well, yeah. Yeah, there have been a number of times when I've been quite concerned. I can remember one time I was camped beside a waterway, because don't forget we do have water buffalo and we have crocodiles and things like that. And I always camp back from the water because obviously you don't want to be too close, because you always take the attitude that there's going to be crocodiles in the water. And one night I had a camp there, and at about midnight, and by a camp I mean I'm talking about a swag on the ground. You know what I mean by swag? It's a rolled up thing and it just went down the ground and said, and I heard this bloody bellowing and puffing and there was a buffalo down on the water having a drink. And pretty obviously he'd been grabbed by a crocodile because there was a hell of a commotion going on. And then he broke free and he came up and he galloped straight through my camp. And I thought, well, he's gone through the camp and gone that way. The crocodile's still there. Crocodile's still hungry. I think I'll move on. So that's what happened.
Have you ever seen any advice given by the likes of grills, beers, etc. that you disagree with?
Oh, look, to be honest, I've never watched Bear Grylls. I've seen the trailers and things like that. And, you know, he does his thing and I do mine. And I think he's an entertainer more than an educator, whereas I took the opposite approach, I think. The question was, have I ever lost my pistol? No, it was a revolver, and no, I've never lost it. I'd be court-martialed if I did.
Tell us a little bit about your hat and how you came across that unusual shape.
Well, that's a Cooper sombrero, and when you first get it from the Cooper hat people, it's a bit like that dome that Hoss Cartwright used to wear.
Oh yeah.
That dates it, doesn't it? You know? And the bash, the shape, goes way back to Sir Sidney Kidman. He was one of the big pastoral people in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Australia. And a lot of the ringers, the station hands, the stockmen, they had that bash in the hat way back then. And the last thing I wanted to do when and that hat was on my head for 15 years before television came along. It didn't happen because of television. And that hat, you know, I put that in because I just didn't want to imitate pseudo-American stuff. I just wanted to stick with the Australian traditional stuff. No, it's had pups quite a few times. Alrighty. Okay, we'll call it quits. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You alright there?
Alright. Before it gets damaged, we've got to find it. We'll go in. It will go in.
The Bushcraft Show. Mrs. Chunky. Fire. 1 Dutch mountain. 2 Dutch mountains. A disco. A disco. Another disco far over there. Several more over there. But then a Franti. Yeah, baby. Proper. Totally packed. Smoke City. Bushcraft Show with Chunky Prepper and Mrs. Chunky. Do you have anything to say, Mrs. Chunky? Nothing to say. We did have neighbours, but now they're gone. We have got a neighbour over that side who coughs a lot, coughs up phlegm a lot, and smokes weed, strong weed. What do you say, Mrs. Chunky? We have fire. I don't think Mrs. Chunky realises how close, how tense are. If she did, she wouldn't have stoked it like she did.
You got a fire extinguisher in you?
No.
Yeah? You come prepared. You're a survivor. So she says.
I'm a prepper, not a survivor.
Got to go to that one tomorrow for apocalypse.
Would love to be in the middle down there, but my stature doesn't allow for it, so hopefully if we can be up here we'll be able to see a little bit better. First of all, for you guys that don't know me, my name is Jason Ingemels and I have the pleasure of leading the guys over at Woodland Ways, the stand over there. For the talk today, I thought it was going to be a good opportunity for us to have a little bit of a review really on where we are at the moment and indeed where we've come from in this industry, and then maybe hopefully a little bit of a chat about where we might be going. So that was my outline plan for the next 45 minutes or however long it takes. But I'd very much welcome, this isn't about Jason Ingemels, this is not about my views in its entirety. I would very much like to engage and maybe throw a few questions out there and such through the talk as well, because if it's not for you guys, then we wouldn't have the pleasure of doing our jobs in the first place. So it's you guys that are leading this industry, not us. So that's where I'd like to go. Unfortunately, I can't see my own presentation. There we go. So how did it all start? You know, how on earth did we get to this stage where we've got a field full of people and all selling lots of various different bits and bobs, and you can probably remortgage your house to get some of this stuff. How on earth did we get to this stage? You know, 14 years ago, when I had the privilege of starting off professionally in this industry, there was a relatively few beardy weirdies out there that were teaching these skills, you know, and not much has changed. There's just more beardy weirdies out there teaching the skills now, and you know, and who we got up there? We got Ben Orford up there doing a pole leg demonstration and such. So I want to have a little review of all of that kind of stuff, but a little bit of interaction to begin with then. So if I say to you, a bushcraft and survival skills, what's the first name that springs to mind? Anybody? Oh. Thank you for the heckle. No, that's not true at all. But somebody shouted out Rain Mears. Yeah, definitely. Anybody else that springs to mind immediately? The next name. Lofty Wiseman, that is a wonderful thing to hear. Just for a second I feared we might have that one as number 2. And not that there's anything against this gentleman by any stretch of the imagination, but generally speaking, those two individuals now, you know, they're the ones that most people think about straight away. This sentence at the top here, this was my fundamental reason for wanting to do this talk. Yeah, but there's only a very few of us out there doing it properly. Now that was said to me from an individual that is up in the top ranks of the industry, and and I was sitting having a conversation with him about where we were going as an industry. And that hurt a little bit, and that's the fundamental reason why I wanted to come and engage with you guys, because I think it's quite a narrow-minded perspective. There are undoubtedly a lot of us out there that are teaching these skills, but like I say, you know, is bushcraft teaching a child how to light a piece of cotton wool with a fire steel, or is it getting an adult to light a fire with a piece of iron pyrites and flint? You know, where is the line? Where is this bushcraft? What is this bushcraft? So that upset me a little bit, but I do understand it, because the next phrase, I teach bushcraft, what on earth does that mean? It is so broad-reaching, so wide-reaching. So I'm hoping that we can maybe, you can answer some of my questions so I can figure it out as we're going. But also the last bit, the survival expert. I don't like that term. The amount of interviews and newspaper articles and all of this kind of stuff where I've been referred to as that survival expert. I tell you, if a herd of zombies are coming out here now, I'm the first one away from here. I'm not a survival expert. You know, for me, we use these survival skills to build on the foundation of teaching the bushcraft skills. And so personally, you know, I'm not a favour of the term. I think the term was really readily used, you know, in the early days of the 70s and the 80s, where it was always, you know, about Combat and Survival magazine and the other few that was out there. But I think for us as an industry, we've moved beyond that, and certainly the skills that my gentlemen teach and ladies teach. And unfortunately, the old romantic image of us, you know, crossing the Sahara on the back of a camel, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen as much nowadays. This gentleman, this is a perfect example to me of bushcraft. Inside his pocket, he had an emergency beacon spot locator that was linked to me. If he'd have pressed his red button, I would have instigated a plan to extract him from that desert. He made an assessment. He'd done all of his planning for this trip. He made an assessment on his own medical condition that he wasn't going to die. He was hours away from the nearest village, but he made that assessment. Luckily, it was supported. It comes back to the planning that you discussed before. We'd got support vehicles there with him as well. And yes, it was an uncomfortable 4-hour drive to the village, bouncing around in the back of a pickup truck. And then it was an unfortunate, you know, 6 or 7 hour drive again to the nearest hospital after that. However, what he'd done, he's got the skill set to travel in these very remote conditions, the very remote environments. Those kind of training starts here, but never bushcraft. I put myself on the parapet here. This is my shop. I sell kit. Is it bushcraft? This is a bit of a split now that we're probably going to get. All I'm going to do is tell you my point of view. When I travel to extreme environments, I need good kit. I need high quality equipment that isn't going to let me down. So I sell it. This whole journey of selling kit started when I met my wife, and she joined the team full time. We had to pay a salary for her, so we started selling some kit. As the team grew and grew, more and more full-time permanent instructors, we can't sustain an income in December and January for the team. So we sell this kit to make sure that we can carry on with the skills that we're out delivering in the large tent over there. So is it bushcraft? Well, it says it on the magazine there, so it must be. But yes, it is bushcraft. I'm sorry if for the purists out there, but we need good quality equipment out there, and yes, we'll supply it. Look at this. Oh, she looks at us. She knows she's there. Current studies show that the bears have the equivalent eyesight of a human being. In a moment, everybody makes a little swear word. There she goes. She's having a good old look at us. You can imagine the words that were going through some people's heads at that point. Hello. She has 3 cubs with her. Quite unusual. Look at the muscle on her shoulders. Incredible. As she walks up the bank, you'll see it. Now, I've had over the years now many encounters, many close encounters with wild animals. You throw in my insurance company then when we're going to take a group of 9-10 individuals to track these creatures down, you can hear them on the calculator in the background going up and up and up. I don't have a piece of paper that qualifies me to teach people these skills because there isn't one available there. However, those 10 individuals had the most amazing experience of their life. 15 years ago, I would not have done that. I was very happy in the situation where we were. We had 2 natural barriers between us and the animal. We were fully aware that she had 3 cubs because we'd gained the local knowledge of it. And like I say, you know, recent studies have suggested that those bears have exactly the same or equivalent eyesight as what we do, whereas 10 years ago it was thought that bears had very poor eyesight. Incredible sense of smell. All she was doing there was just checking us out. That was all it was. She knew that we was there, and you could tell in her demeanour that she was comfortable with being there as well. And that stand up there, you would automatically think that that was a threat display. It's not. She's just having a look at us. She was more than happy, and her cubs were way out the way, tucked out of the way in safety. How do we know that? Because we went back the following day and tracked them. We got a little bit closer than what I was anticipating, but there's no video of that. But yeah, that was... Okay then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you incredibly, loads and loads and loads for your time, and if you want to speak to us over there, no problem.
Today. This is my 3rd talk of Bushcraft, and this is a new talk for 2015, just for you guys. And today I'm going to be talking about how to survive the apocalypse, but I'm not going to be talking about all the boring stuff, you know, how to set up a shelter and sort out your own generator. I'm going to be talking about the psychology of it, and the psychology of surviving, but in the longer term. So, a little bit about who I am. So, for those of you who haven't seen me before, my name is Dr. Teresa Robinson. I'm one of the senior lecturers at the University of Central Lancashire, and I actually did my PhD in psychobiology and looking specifically at how people deal with life-threatening situations. So I spend a lot of the time in the lab analysing saliva samples, which earned me the very nice name of the Spit Lady. So that's one of the things that I do. I also do some consultancy, so I've been flying out to gas rigs to look at occupational well-being and health of people working in extreme environments. I've also been down with Merseyside Police looking at their riot training. That was exciting for this year. And I walked down with RAF St Morgan at the CS Survival School down there, giving a little bit of psychological input into their survival training. As you can see, that every aspect of my job involves me wearing a silly outfit, which is today carried on with my lovely branded UCLAN jacket, which I have my Twitter ID, which is @DrSurvival. So if after the talk you want to tweet at me how fantastic I was, it's @DrSurvival. And if you want to tell me how terrible it was, it's @DrDisaster. That one doesn't exist. Okay, so science fiction gives us a really good test ground for some of the things that might happen to us. Some of them are quite far-fetched, but some of them actually get a little bit close to reality. So does everyone remember the TV show Survivors? Yep, so yeah, a few people. So early this century we had the new updated version. If you go back a few, I think about 20 years, 30 years prior to that, we had the good 1970s version, which was even more grim and realistic than the modern one. But really, it was about that longer term survival. How do we keep going after that initial event has happened? And how close are we to these science fiction nightmares coming true? Well, if you looked at the New Scientist in I think a couple of issues ago, you'll see that we're actually really close. There are a number of things that have to come together in order for something like a killer disease to take over, and some of those situations are not that far-fetched. Indeed, if we look at things like Ebola and the outbreaks in Africa, you can see how that could actually happen. We could actually face an apocalypse very easily. There are other apocalypses that may happen, such as meteors hitting the Earth or major solar flares occurring, and it's really about the sort of apocalypse that might happen. And that can really affect how we respond. So, for example, we might have something that's a slow onset. So something like bird flu or something like Ebola would take time to build, and we'd see, a collapse of the infrastructure around us happening in a very steady way. So we would get to a tipping point where perhaps the health structures would fall away, the education system wouldn't be able to cope, work would stop happening, people would stop turning up to power stations, for example, because family were ill, they were ill, whatever was happening, and it would take time for that sort of disaster scenario to happen. So a slow onset apocalypse might be a little bit more manageable in the However, we have got to the point where we're disgusted by things that just aren't disgusting. If I show a picture of, a rabbit, I would get in a normal audience, that sounds terrible, in a non-bushcraft audience, I would get a lot of frowns and real proper disgust faces. I tried this insect eating with about 300 of my first year students. How many do you think came forward? Now, I had a queue here, how many do you think? I had two students came forward to try, and they were pretty squealy. So yeah, I don't really hold out much hope for the normal population. That sounds bad. Non-bushcraft population. And if you want to have some grubs to eat, help yourself. Oh.